Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be answering the question, does age gap matter when dating? But before we get into that, if you are watching and if you have not subscribed, you better go down, you better go hit the subscribe button and might as well just click the bell while you're at it because then you'll be notified every single time I post. So in today's video, I am going to be dissecting the topic of age gap relationships, and I'm going to be incorporating facts and statistics per usual. So just keep on watching if you're interested. So first and foremost, let's just define what is an age gap relationship. Some people think it's 5 years, some people think it's 20 years. Well, according to a sexologist, Janet Morrison, who has a PhD, she classifies age gap relationships by an age discrepancy of 10 or more years between the parties involved. There's also another name for these age gap relationships. They're called May-December relationships. I'm not really sure why they call it that, but these relationships are actually a lot less common than people assume. The truth is, there aren't that many people in age gap relationships to begin with. It's just that when you see one, you notice it, and then you think it's all over. It's kind of one of those psychology tricks when you see something and then you see it again and you think it's a lot more common than it actually is. So a new review published in Evolutionary Behavioral Sciences highlights the critical role of age in romantic relationship formation. So this paper came out in 2019, and it found that across all cultures, women are wanting partners who are on average 3.5 years older than them. Furthermore, marriage records show that women tend to marry men who are about 3 years older than them as well. When it comes to online dating, women actually report messaging and initiating contact with men who are older more so than men who are younger. So, I mean, this kind of agrees with the data. It doesn't really tell us how much older these men are when it comes to online dating, but they did find that when it comes to online dating, women tend to favor older men. So there's another paper that talks about age gap relationships, and they found that unfortunately scientific data confirming the rate of age gap relationships are slim, dated, and heteronormative. So they don't really give us much information. The U.S. Census Bureau data from 1999 reports that 8.5% of married couples are in fact in age gap relationships, with the older person identifying as a man in 7.2% of cases. 1.3% of them, it's where the woman is older than the man. So this statistic shows that in age gap relationships, it's more common that the man is the older party than the woman. And from an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense because technically men tend to favor fertile women who tend to be younger and more youthful, and women tend to favor men who have more resources and more security, and that also tends to be older men. So this confirms the data that we found here. There was an infographic in that article that I am going to insert here. So if you look at this infographic, it's a little bit confusing at first, but wherever you see purple, that is a situation where the woman is older than the man. And wherever you see orange or yellow, I think it's yellow, this is a situation where the man is older. So as you can see, there's more yellow. So this confirms that in age gap relationships, the man tends to be older. The other thing that this shows is what percent of people are in these types of relationships. So as you can see, this is basically a standardized bell curve. Bell curves tend to describe so many different things in society. Bell curves describe our heights. Most people are going to fall under average heights, whereas there's really a few people who are extremely tall and a few people who are extremely short. So here we see a bell curve as well. And we see that in age gap relationships, there isn't that much of a difference between the man and the woman. Perhaps, it's 5 to 10 years for the most part. There's very, very few couples that are actually in relationships where one of the partners is 20 or more years older than their partner. So this kind of tends to disagree with a lot of beliefs, because a lot of people think that age gap relationships that are 20 years or more are very prevalent and very common. But in fact, this infographic shows us that there are age gap relationships, but they tend to be about 10 or less years difference between their ages. So next I'm going to insert another infographic, and I was really extremely happy to find this one because not only does it talk about heterosexual age gap relationships, but it also gives us data on lesbian relationships as well as gay relationships. So it's super interesting because it compares the average age gap between each of these partnerships. So as we can see here, heterosexual relationships, so relationships between men and women, are seen with the red. The lesbian relationships are seen with blue, and the gay relationships are seen with green. So as we can see, all types of age gap relationships tend to increase as we get older, right? So it doesn't matter if you're lesbian, gay, or straight. As you get older, you tend to, I shouldn't say tend, right? Because it's still the minority of the population, but it's more likely that you're involved in an age gap relationship. When people were 20 to 23 years of age, the average age gap was just about 1.5 to 3 years. However, once they crossed 24 years of age, the age gaps widen. So we can see that this chart kind of tends to go up as people are getting older. And so for heterosexual relationships, gaps ranged from 3 to 5 years on average. And for gays, gaps ranged from 3 to 9.5 years. So a bigger gap than we see with the heterosexual relationships. And then for lesbian partnerships, gaps ranged from 3 to 9 years as well. This is actually really interesting. I never thought about this before, but this data shows that gay and lesbians tend to have a greater age gap between them than heterosexual relationships. So I'm not really sure why. I don't know what the explanation is for this, but I just wanted to throw it out there because I found it interesting, and I really liked that it was inclusive of all types of relationships. Now let's talk about what most people think about age gap relationships and what I personally think about them. So I would assume that the average person doesn't really vibe or agree with age gap relationships because there seems to be an inherent power imbalance, right? If someone's older, then they tend to have lived more life, right? They have more experience, more knowledge, more wisdom. And the person who is younger is generally seen as naive. They're more innocent. They don't really know much, and they could be getting themselves into a situation that maybe they're not ready for, maybe they're not comfortable with. And I do believe that that is true, especially when you are young. I think that once you are in your mid-20s or even 30s, age gap relationships become more common because the lines tend to be more blurred. Once you've graduated college and started your career, everyone is kind of on the same footing, right? I mean, someone might be divorced, someone maybe has had a child, but besides that, we tend to all kind of be on the same level playing field. So I think beyond a certain point, age gap relationships are not as controversial or taboo as they are when you are in your early 20s. But I do want to say that being in an age gap relationship can have more difficulties than the average relationship. So let's talk about why this could be. So first and foremost, do you share the same goals? That is true for any relationship, but it's even more so true for an age gap relationship because there tends to be a difference in the goals that the people are wanting to achieve in their life. For example, let's say a 20-year-old is, dating a 50-year-old. Well, the 50-year-old, perhaps he's been married before. He's already had children. So he doesn't really maybe want to do those things. Whereas the 20-year-old is someone who wants to get married and wants to have children. that is a clear difference in goals. So that would not work. Now, it would be different if, let's say, a 20-year-old was dating a 40-year-old and they were both, willing to get married and have kids and share that same vision. So this brings me to point number 2, which is, do you want to have children or not? For women, this tends to be a timely thing. Obviously, there are ways to get around it nowadays with all the technology and freezing your eggs and all those sorts of things. But generally, women want to have kids when they're young, when they're active, when they're youthful, when they're healthy. And men tend to want to have kids with women who are younger, right? They don't really want to be having kids as 40, 50-year-olds and maybe even more. Maybe they'll be up for adopting, but not for having their own children. So if you guys want to have children, that can be another kind of complication to get through because there might be a difference in opinion there. So it's important to have these conversations in the early phases of dating so you don't get in a situation where you marry someone and then you find out they want kids and you don't, or vice versa. And last but not least, the third thing that you should ask yourself is, do you guys want to have a similar lifestyle? So for example, let's say you're dating someone and he is retired. He is in that part of his life when he wants to travel and unwind and be free and not really be tied down to a certain schedule or a certain commitment. Well, that is not really going to last well with someone who is doing their PhD and has to commit a bunch of hours at their college. So it really comes down to having a shared goal and a shared vision, having the same opinion on whether or not you want kids, and wanting to live the same lifestyle. Because I think truly, if all 3 of these things align, then an age gap relationship is not going to be that much different from dating someone a few years younger or older than you. So that is my personal opinion. I would love to hear your guys' personal opinion down in the comment section. I'd also like to say that there could be some pros and positives to being in an age gap relationship. So when you're in an age gap relationship, you are able to offer fresh insights to the other person. So the older person is going to be able to provide more security and more balance and more knowledge and wisdom and a more grounded, level-headed effect. And the younger person is going to be more playful, more outgoing, and they're going to inspire more of that spontaneity and that fun, exciting side of the other person. So I think that there could be a nice balance and it could really bring out the best in both partners. However, you do need to realize that, as you age, illness and death and all of those things are going to be, prevalent, especially if you're dating someone who is much older than you. Those things are going to happen when you are in a different time of your life. So these are all things to consider before getting into an age gap relationship. So overall, there's really no clear-cut answer when it comes to age gap relationships. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they neutral? It really depends on how you look at it. I truly think that instead of judging or labeling people who are in age gap relationships, we should do our best to understand them, to listen to them, to really hear why they fell in love with this person to begin with, and maybe then we could actually understand the dynamic better. I truly believe that if you and your partner share the same goals, vision, lifestyle, and idea for your future, then really nobody's unsolicited advice should affect that. So that's all I have for today. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, leave me a comment and a thumbs up, and I will see you all very, very soon. Mwah.